At 4:55 on a Friday afternoon, Preston Thorne slid a sheet of paper across the glass conference table and told me my $90,000 payment had been canceled. Outside the room, most of the office had already emptied. Inside, the late December sunset burned across the windows, turning every face orange while the wall clock counted down the last 5 minutes of Zenith's control. He did it with an audience. Clara Hensley, our chief financial officer, sat to his right with her hands folded over a yellow legal pad. A woman from Human Resources stared at the table, refusing to look up. Julian Ward leaned back in his leather chair like he had already won a major victory. Preston tapped the paper with one finger, his eyes conveying a cold, corporate indifference that made my stomach turn. Leadership has reviewed the situation, Elias. We have decided the innovation bonus is not justified. My name is Elias Vance. I was 58 years old, Director of Systems Innovation at Zenith Grid Solutions, and the person who had built the battery monitoring method behind the company's most profitable product line. I had designed it from scratch, debugging the earliest prototypes on my own kitchen table. Preston knew all of that. He also knew I had spent 8 years solving failures no one else could solve. I had flown to freezing utility sites at 2:00 in the morning. I had stood inside steel battery rooms while alarms screamed. I had found the defect that nearly caused a national safety recall. But in that room, he spoke as if I had asked for charity. The work falls within your normal responsibilities, he continued. We are not paying an extra $90,000 for an employee doing his job. Julian gave a small, smug smile and looked down, pretending to study his notes. Then Preston delivered the second part of the plan. Julian will take over the commercial launch of the new platform. You will support the transition and provide any technical history he needs. For 4 months, Julian had attended meetings and repeated phrases he had heard from me. He could explain our product with clean slides and confident hand movements. He could not explain why the system flagged a battery 12 minutes before standard sensors detected danger. Still, Preston had chosen him to present my work as his own. The Human Resources representative finally looked at me. Her face carried the careful blankness people wear when they know something is wrong, but have decided their salary matters more than the truth. Preston waited for me to react. I could see what he wanted. Tears would make me look weak. Anger would make me look unstable. If I raised my voice, he could call me difficult and let Human Resources write the final termination chapter for him. So I kept my hands still. Is this decision final? I asked. He seemed almost disappointed by my calm. Yes, it is. And you are personally authorizing the cancellation? His eyes narrowed. I am the CEO. Of course I am. I need that in writing. The room went quiet. Preston leaned back. You already have the letter. The letter calls it a compensation adjustment. I need written confirmation that Zenith will not issue the $90,000 payment due today and that the decision is final. Clara looked at him then. It was quick, but I saw it. A warning look. Preston did not notice. He opened his laptop with the irritated confidence of a man who believed documentation was power because he had never seen it used against him. At 4:57 p.m., my phone vibrated. His email read, "This confirms that Zenith Grid Solutions will not make the requested $90,000 innovation payment. The payment is canceled and the matter is closed." I read it twice. Satisfied? He asked. Yes, I said. He kept talking. Something about restructuring, something about loyalty, something about how careers depended on being flexible during periods of transition. I barely heard him. At the top corner of the conference room, the digital clock changed from 4:59 to 5. My phone vibrated again. This message came from my attorney, Audrey Brooks. Escrow condition satisfied. Patent transfer complete. VoltGrid is now the lawful owner. I turned the screen face down. Preston was still explaining how generous Zenith had been to me. Julian was nodding. Human Resources was taking notes. Clara had gone completely still. None of them knew that the payment Preston called a bonus was tied to a separate patent license. None of them knew the deadline was 5. And none of them knew that by refusing to pay me and putting that refusal in writing, Preston had ended Zenith's exclusive rights to the technology holding its future together. He had tried to save $90,000. Instead, at exactly 5 p.m., he handed his biggest competitor the one thing his company could not replace: I did not celebrate when I left the conference room. I walked past the dark offices, took the elevator to the parking garage, and sat behind the wheel of my car without turning on the engine. The concrete level was cold and nearly empty. Somewhere above me, Zenith's logo glowed across the front of the building. The patent sale was complete. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt tired. My hands were steady, but my chest felt heavy. I had spent years believing loyalty would protect good work from office politics. That belief was gone. Preston had not misunderstood my value. He had measured it, decided I was easier to replace than to respect, and built a plan around my silence. The $90,000 renewal payment mattered, but the money was only the final insult. What hurt was how carefully they had tried to erase me. 8 years earlier, Zenith had operated from a converted warehouse, with leaking windows, folding tables, and 12 employees sharing one unreliable coffee machine. I joined when the company had more ideas than customers and more debt than equipment. I built the first working version of the battery monitoring system on a borrowed test rack. I trained the first engineering team. When early units failed at client sites, I took the calls no matter what time it was. At one utility plant, our batteries began heating faster than the control software could explain. The client wanted every unit removed. Zenith could not afford that. The plant manager was furious, threatening to cancel our entire pilot program unless we resolved the heating issues immediately. I stayed on site for 3 nights, studied the sensor patterns, and found a hidden chain reaction in the charging cycle. That discovery prevented a safety recall and gave us the method that later became the center of Zenith's platform. For years, people inside the company knew exactly what I had done. Then Preston arrived. A private equity group had gained influence over our board and brought him in to make Zenith look ready for acquisition. Preston cared about fast growth, clean charts, and executives who could speak for 20 minutes without admitting uncertainty. He did not hate technical people. He simply believed we were tools. Julian understood that immediately. He joined as a strategy executive at age 29, representing a massive generation gap compared to my 58 years. He began appearing in meetings that had always required me. At first, he asked basic questions and took careful notes. 2 months later, he repeated my answers to investors as if they were his conclusions. My name disappeared from presentation slides. Invitations stopped reaching my calendar. Preston asked me to brief Julian before client meetings, then introduced him as the leader behind the platform. The annual payment was delayed at the same time. Legal sent me a new intellectual property agreement that would assign every past, present, and future invention related to energy storage to Zenith. The language was broad enough to swallow my patent without naming it. I refused to sign. Preston called my concerns unnecessary legal anxiety. Julian told me that senior leaders had to be team players. That was when I stopped treating the pattern as office politics. They planned to cancel the payment, pressure me into signing away the patent, and remove me after Julian had absorbed enough of my knowledge to look credible. So I hired my own patent attorney, Audrey Brooks. Now, sitting in the garage, I opened my personal tablet and found the employment agreement I had signed on my first day. Near the back was a page Preston had probably never read. Schedule A. It listed the battery monitoring patent by number and identified it as property I had created before joining Zenith. The company had been allowed to use it, it had never owned it. Below that was the renewal clause tied to the payment Preston had just canceled. Read the final sentence again. His decision had not taken $90,000 from me. It had activated the clause that took the patent from him. Before I joined Zenith, I worked alone as an independent engineering consultant for 25 years. I was not building a billion-dollar product. I was trying to solve one narrow problem. Large battery systems could look stable right up until they were not. Standard sensors often caught heat, pressure, or voltage changes only after the dangerous pattern had already started. I developed a method that watched how several small signals moved together. One reading by itself meant little, but when the signals shifted in a certain order, the system could warn of trouble much earlier. I paid for the testing myself. I wrote the first models at my kitchen table. I hired a patent lawyer with money I had saved for a house deposit. The patent application was filed months before Zenith ever contacted me. That timing mattered. When Zenith's founder recruited me, I showed him the filing. He understood two things immediately. The method could become the heart of the company's battery platform, and the company did not own it. Zenith was too small to buy the patent outright. So, we made a separate deal. The company received an exclusive license to use my method in large-scale energy storage. In simple terms, Zenith could build its business around the patent as long as it renewed that right every year. The renewal payment was $90,000. It was due by 5/Mlectane on the same date each December. The agreement was strict on purpose. The founder had insisted on that wording because he knew leadership could change. He told me an executive might see the payment, misunderstand it, and try to remove it from a budget. The automatic deadline protected both sides. Zenith could not keep using my work without paying, and I could not withdraw the license while Zenith followed the agreement. It was fair, balanced, and impossible to misread. Early investors wanted certainty. They needed to know exactly when Zenith controlled the patent and exactly what would happen if the company failed to renew. The answer was written in plain language. If the payment was not completed by the deadline, Zenith's exclusive license ended automatically. Its option to buy the patent ended with it. There was no grace period and no extra week to fix the mistake. Zenith would still own its code, hardware, branding, customer contracts, and every improvement its employees had created, but it would lose the legal right to use the protected detection method at the center of the platform. For 8 years, the company paid on time. Finance recorded the amount as a patent license expense. Board minutes referred to the annual renewal. Each year, legal issued a new certificate confirming that Zenith's rights remained active. No one had ever called it a bonus until Preston wanted to cancel it. Months before the deadline, a patent broker contacted my attorney. VoltGrid had reviewed the public filing and wanted to discuss buying the patent. VoltGrid was Zenith's biggest competitor. I said no at first. As long as Zenith's exclusive license remained active, I would not interfere with its business. I had spent too many years helping build the company to create a crisis for people who had done nothing wrong. Then Preston started delaying the payment. Legal sent me the broad assignment. Julian began taking public credit. My attorney told me the pattern was no longer settled, so I agreed to one protected step. VoltGrid placed its purchase money of $2,400,000 in escrow. That meant a neutral party held the funds. The sale could not close unless Zenith knowingly failed to renew its license. If Zenith paid on time, the deal disappeared. If it did not, the patent would transfer the moment its rights expired. Preston's email at 4:57 p.m. proved the company was not confused or waiting on accounting. The CEO had personally refused payment and declared the matter closed. At 5 p.m., Zenith's license expired. At the same moment, the escrow condition was met. VoltGrid became the lawful owner of the patent. Preston thought he had canceled a bonus. What he had really canceled was his company's control over the invention supporting its next decade of growth. I had prepared for Preston's next move because men like him rarely admit they made a mistake. 3 weeks before the deadline, my attorney, Audrey Brooks, gave me a clear set of rules. "Protect what belongs to you," she said. "Do not touch what belongs to Zenith." That meant I could preserve my original patent records, but I could not walk out with company secrets. I gathered the documents I had owned before joining Zenith: my design notebooks, testing receipts, patent filing records, employment agreement, Schedule A, and the original license. I also kept lawful copies of annual payment records and emails sent directly to me about the renewal. I did not copy software code. I did not download client lists, pricing models, internal reports, or engineering files. I did not forward a single confidential document to VoltGrid. Audrey hired a digital forensic specialist to inspect my personal laptop, tablet, and cloud storage. He created a dated report showing where every file came from and when it had been saved. He also recorded a list of company systems I had never accessed from those devices. That detail mattered because Preston would later claim I had taken everything needed to recreate Zenith's platform. The report would show the opposite before his lawyers could turn suspicion into a story. It felt extreme at the time. After Preston's meeting, it felt necessary. The VoltGrid agreement was written with the same care. The company was buying the patent, not Zenith's product. VoltGrid could use the protected method, but it would have to build its own code, hardware design, and customer system from the ground up. I was offered a future role as vice president of grid intelligence. I could accept it, but I could not begin work until my separation duties were complete. I could explain my own invention. I could not reveal how Zenith had implemented it. At 5:03 p.m., while I was still inside the building, I sent 3 messages. My fingers were steady as I typed, knowing that every word in these messages was backed by solid documentation. The first was my resignation. My contract allowed immediate departure if Zenith failed to make a required patent payment. I cited that clause and kept the message brief. I did not accuse anyone or threaten a lawsuit. The second message went to Zenith's general counsel. It stated that the exclusive license had expired at 5, and that VoltGrid was now the patent owner. The third went to Sylvia Finch, chair of the board's audit committee. Attached was a sealed evidence package containing Schedule A, the license agreement, 8 years of payment history, Preston's 4:57 p.m. email, and the escrow confirmation. I asked the board to preserve all related records and review any public claim that Zenith owned the patent. Then I began my exit. I returned my laptop, company phone, building badge, and security token. An IT manager watched while the devices were checked. He confirmed that I had not erased files, disabled systems, or copied restricted data. Preston appeared near the security desk before I left. "You are making this much worse than it needs to be," he said. I looked at him. "I followed the agreement. You arranged a sale to a competitor while employed here. I arranged a conditional transaction involving property Zenith never owned." His jaw tightened. "You think a technicality will protect you?" "No," I said. "The documents will." I signed the equipment receipt and walked out carrying only my handbag and the coat I had brought that morning. I did not take a box of office items because I had quietly removed my personal belongings over the previous week. There was nothing dramatic for him to stop. No scene for human resources to record. No missing data for legal to use against me. By the time Preston returned to his office, Zenith's general counsel had opened my notice. She called him immediately. She read the clause aloud, reaching the sentence he had never bothered to check. Failure to complete the annual payment by the deadline would cause automatic expiration of all exclusive rights and the purchase option. There was a long silence. For the first time that evening, Preston understood the size of his mistake. The patent was gone. Monday morning, Zenith acted as if nothing had happened. At 8:12 a.m., the company published a press release announcing the national expansion of its battery platform. The headline called it Zenith's next generation of proprietary safety technology. Julian's name appeared 3 times. Mine did not appear once. The marketing team had clearly worked through the weekend to prepare the announcement, unaware that the foundation had already crumbled. The release described him as the executive who had led the development of the detection system and stated that Zenith owned all intellectual property needed to sell, operate, and expand the platform. Preston already knew that statement was false. He had received the expiration notice Friday evening. General counsel had read the clause to him. He knew VoltGrid now owned the patent, but correcting the release would have forced him to explain why the company had lost a critical right 5 minutes after he canceled my payment. So he acted as if confidence could replace ownership. At 9:04 a.m., Audrey forwarded me an email from Zenith's legal department. Attached was a new patent assignment. The document claimed Schedule A had been included in my employment agreement by administrative error. It asked me to transfer the patent to Zenith in exchange for the restored $90,000 payment and 12 weeks of severance. The assignment was dated Friday before the deadline. They had backdated it. This was a direct violation of California Penal Code Section 470 for forgery, a serious offense. "They want you to validate it," Audrey wrote. "Do not call them. Do not edit it. Do not sign anything. We sent one written question. Please explain why Zenith requires a retroactive assignment of intellectual property it publicly claims to own." They never answered. The offer told me something important. Preston was trying to create a new paper trail before anyone outside legal noticed the old one. Restoring the payment would cost him $90,000. Admitting the patent had transferred could cost Zenith millions. The severance was not generosity. It was the cheapest price he could imagine for my silence. He still assumed I was negotiating from fear. He had underestimated me once. Now he was doing it again. By noon, Preston sent a second letter. This one claimed Zenith had terminated me for disloyal conduct before my resignation became effective. It accused me of secretly arranging a competitor deal while employed and threatened to enforce every confidentiality and non-competition clause in my contract. The language sounded aggressive. The facts were weak. Audrey responded with the escrow timeline, the original ownership records, and the independent forensic report. She made one point clear. VoltGrid had received no client data, no source code, no internal pricing, and no Zenith trade secrets. The company could dislike my sale. It could not turn my patent into its property by calling me disloyal. Preston might still have contained the damage if he had stopped there. He did not. That afternoon, he and Julian presented the expansion plan to Oakport Power, one of Zenith's largest clients. Oakport was considering a long-term contract covering 12 new storage sites. Julian walked the client through the same polished slides built from my work. He called the detection method our protected core technology. Oakport's lead counsel interrupted him. Which patent protects the method? Julian paused. He looked toward Preston, then back at the screen. Our legal team manages the specific filings, he said. The lawyer did not move on. What is the patent number? Julian did not know it. He had spent months accepting praise for the invention, but he had never read the patent carrying my name. Preston stepped in and assured the client that Zenith held permanent control of every right needed for the platform. That answer created a record. By then, VoltGrid had filed the ownership transfer with the patent office. Its counsel also sent Zenith a formal notice. Zenith could maintain existing systems during a temporary safety review, but it could not sell new products using the protected method without VoltGrid's permission. Oakport paused the expansion talks. Its legal team forwarded the ownership question and Zenith's public statement to Sylvia and the audit committee. Friday's mistake had cost Zenith a license. Monday's lie threatened its clients, financing, and board. And for the first time, Julian's confident smile was gone. By Tuesday, the problem was no longer something Preston could contain. Zenith's general counsel completed an independent review of the patent records. Her findings were direct. The patent had never been assigned to Zenith, Schedule A was valid, and the annual deadline was enforceable. Additionally, she found Clara's warning memo from 2 weeks prior. Clara had warned Preston that missing the deadline would end Zenith's exclusive rights and purchase option. Preston had replied, "Remove it. We are not paying." That message changed the situation from carelessness to a decision. Within hours, Zenith expansion lender froze our funds, and Oakport Power suspended its expansion contract. Preston called me directly on my personal phone. "Elias, this has gone too far," he said. "We can restore the $90,000 payment today." "The patent is no longer mine," I replied. "We can fix that. Come back as senior vice president." "I will tell the board there was an administrative misunderstanding." I refused, telling him he made his decision in writing. VoltGrid's lawyer sent Zenith our license agreement, Preston's email, the escrow documents, and a forensic report proving no confidential files had been transferred. In exchange for a short standstill period, Zenith had to preserve records and stop claiming ownership. Preston agreed publicly, but tried to control the evidence privately. He ordered staff to alter presentations, but version histories recorded every change. Clara Hensley refused to sign a financial disclosure, claiming Zenith controlled the technology. 2 senior engineers declined to sign declarations claiming Julian had led development. Late Tuesday afternoon, Sylvia Finch called a special board meeting. I attended with Audrey, alongside VoltGrid's licensing counsel, Clara, Julian, and representatives from Oakport Power. Preston arrived first, still believing he could reduce the crisis to one bitter former employee. But when he saw me enter with 2 attorneys and a sealed evidence file, his confidence crumbled. Sylvia Finch presided. Zenith's counsel, Clara, Oakport's lawyers, and VoltGrid's counsel filled the table. Preston sat across from me, Julian nearby. Preston began before Sylvia finished the opening statement, calling the situation a coordinated attack. He claimed I exploited a payment delay and breached my duty, arguing the $90,000 was a discretionary bonus and Schedule A was a clerical mistake. Sylvia turned to me. Elias, respond in whatever order you think is clearest. I prefer chronological order, I said. Audrey placed my original employment agreement on the screen, showing Schedule A was valid and approved. The board saw my patent number next to the words pre-existing intellectual property owned by Elias Vance. I explained that the company had received a license, not ownership, and showed 8 years of payment records booked as a patent license expense. Audrey then opened Clara's warning memo, titled Critical License Renewal Risk. It stated that cancellation would end exclusive rights. When Sylvia asked Preston if he received it, he muttered that he gets hundreds of emails. Clara then placed his printed 6-word reply on the table. Remove it. We are not paying. No one spoke. I presented the timeline. At 4:55 p.m., Preston canceled the payment. At 4:57 p.m., he confirmed it in writing. At 5 p.m., the license expired and VoltGrid's escrow closed. At 5:03 p.m., I resigned under my contract. General counsel confirmed each step was legally effective. Julian Ward admitted under questioning that he did not invent the system and had been told to present it as an executive initiative. Oakport's lead lawyer confronted Preston, pointing out that he had asked them to sign a contract based on ownership he did not have. VoltGrid's counsel presented an 18-month transition license for $750,000, far higher than the canceled payment. The terms required accurate credit, independent compliance, and public corrections. Preston tried to blame me for putting jobs at risk, but Audrey displayed the forensic report, proving I had protected customers. I looked at Preston. I did not create this crisis, I said. The damage began when you decided the rules applied to everyone except you. Sylvia asked Preston and Julian to leave. The board voted to suspend his authority pending termination. Preston's suspension became a termination 3 weeks later. The investigation found he had ignored Clara's warning, canceled a binding license, pressured legal to create a backdated assignment, and made false statements to Oakport. The board terminated him for cause, canceling all his benefits. Julian Ward was removed and resigned. Zenith corrected the press release, identifying me as the original inventor. The board accepted the transition license, and Zenith paid the missed compensation, my legal expenses, and a retaliation settlement. I joined VoltGrid as vice president of Grid Intelligence after my separation. We built a platform using our own code and hardware, utilizing my patent without using Zenith's implementation. I finally entered meetings as the person responsible for the work, rather than waiting in the hallway. I did not celebrate Zenith's pain. They had to learn that the right person must carry the cost of his choices. Zenith's board adopted an intellectual property review process. Preston had treated technical ownership as a detail beneath attention. His failure forced the company to make it part of governance. I kept only 2 documents. Preston's email at 4:57 p.m. saying the payment is canceled and the escrow confirmation at 5:09 p.m. saying patent transfer complete. 3 minutes separated them. In the first, Preston believed he had reduced my value to 0. In the second, the market proved he never understood my value at all. He tried to save $90,000 by humiliating the man who understood the company's foundation. Instead, Zenith paid several times for rights once held cheaply. Julian's false image collapsed. Preston lost his title, and I walked into my next boardroom owning my work, my name, and my future.